Binary triggers and forced reset. Older video of mine about questions made it clear they didn't know because they said, what's the difference? Or in your states, older videos that made it pretty clear that people have, some. I decided tonight I'm going to talk about them. And short reset triggers. Not short fucking reset. Forced. Yankee here. The other day, yesterday I got some questions. No, comments. Yesterday I got some comments and questions. And short reset triggers. Not short. And on the release they fire. Once on the pull, once on the release. We'll get into that later. Why am I getting into that now? And a short reset. Not short! God damn it! Hey everybody, Yankee here. I fucking hurt myself. Mainly one of the take like 37. Hey everybody, Yankee here. Yesterday I got a couple of comments and questions on one of my older videos about binary triggers. And as I was reading those questions and comments, I started to figure out that some people don't know the difference between a binary trigger and a forced reset trigger. And I figured out some people don't seem to understand the legality of either one. Mainly I figured this out because one of the questions was, what's the difference between a binary trigger and a forced reset trigger? And one of the other questions were, are they legal? So, didn't exactly take I want to say Dr. Seuss, but that's not right. What's his name? Sherlock Holmes. It doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to figure out what I was saying there. My brain don't work so good no more. But as I was saying, some people don't understand the difference and they don't understand the legality of the two items. So I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about how a binary trigger and a forced reset trigger are different. And I want to talk about how the federal government has reacted to both of them and how different states have reacted to them. First off, let's talk about how they're different. If you look at my crude little drawing of an AR here, we'll show the difference between a standard trigger, a binary trigger, and a short reset trigger in a very simple and easy to understand way. All right, in this picture, that little red circle, that's your finger. Now you're going to put your finger on the trigger and you're going to pull that trigger back. When you pull that trigger back, that gun's going to fire. And then you're going to let pressure off the trigger. Now, normally I wouldn't say pull your finger completely off the trigger like this. It's not a revolver. But just to show that pressure is being taken off the trigger, I'm going to move the finger all the way forward and then show you the trigger resetting. So that's what happens. You pull the trigger, it goes off, and then you let your finger go forward. You take the pressure off the trigger, it resets, and then you can do it again. And let's say you're going to shoot for 2 seconds here. And let's say you can get 4 shots off in 2 seconds with a standard trigger. Well, let's compare that now to a binary trigger. Now, the way the binary trigger works is it's pretty much the same as the standard trigger, but you pull that trigger to the rear, it fires. You release pressure on the trigger, it resets, it fires again. It fires both on the pull and the reset. So if you fire the same number of times in the same amount of time, you do 4 pulls on that trigger in a couple of seconds, and you're going to fire 8 rounds instead of 4. You're not pulling the trigger any faster. You're just firing 2 rounds every time you pull the trigger. That's why it's called a binary trigger. It doesn't go both ways sexually. It actually does 2 things. It fires on the pull, it fires on the release. Now, a forced reset trigger is completely different. It still only fires every time you pull the trigger. You have to pull the trigger to the rear and the gun fires. Now the difference here is you get to skip a step. You don't have to release pressure on the trigger because that trigger is kicked forward much harder than it would be in a regular reset. So you can maintain that 3 pounds of pressure or whatever it takes to pull the trigger continuously. That kickback of the trigger, when it resets, it'll overcome the force of your finger, push it forward. So then once it's reset, since you're continuing pressure on the trigger, it immediately goes back again. You're pulling it right back. You're never really stopping your pull. You're just having your pull overcome every now and then by the reset of the trigger. So that means You can pull the trigger more often because you're not having to go through that release and pressure and letting the trigger reset. It's doing that on its own. You're just pulling. So you can fire faster. Maybe the same 2-second time frame here while you're pulling this trigger. Since you're being able to skip a step there, you'll fire more. You'll fire like 6 times in the same amount of time that you would fire 4 with a standard trigger. So you're firing 6 rounds. So if you look at them back to back here, standard trigger, binary trigger, forced reset trigger, you're seeing there's a difference. On the standard one, 4 rounds. Binary one, 8 rounds. Forced reset, 6 rounds. So you get actually the most rounds out of the binary one, but you get a quicker rate of moving that trigger with the forced reset. So that's the difference. You know, it's very simple when you think about it. But the legality of them, that's different. Now, on the federal level, they're both legal. Now, the forced reset triggers were declared illegal, but they got sued and they reversed their position. Now, the binary triggers, well, the ATF has said that they're legal because, you know, it doesn't fire more than 1 round with a trigger pull. It fires 1 with a trigger pull and 1 with a reset. Now, there is a lot of evidence that people inside the ATF have been trying to change that because they want to be able to say that the pull and the release are 1 action, but legally, that's 2 actions, so it does not violate the letter of the law. So as of now, right now, they're both legal at the federal level, and the only one they've ever tried to outlaw is the forced reset trigger, which doesn't fire as many rounds as the binary trigger, which doesn't make sense to me. But, you know, when does the government ever make sense? So on a federal level, they are both legal. And the forced reset trigger has been declared illegal, but then they lost a lawsuit and they reversed themselves, and the binary one has just always been legal. But like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on in the ATF, and there are some conflicting opinions that say that they are illegal because they fire more than 1 round with each trigger pull, and then I guess they count the reset as the same thing as the pull. So we'll see how that goes in the future, but right now they're both legal. Now, I can't have them in the state of Washington. Now, the binary trigger is illegal here, which you might say to yourself, though, but, oh, Yankee, you got a binary trigger. No, I don't. If you watch that video on binary triggers, and I'll link it in the upper corner here, I clearly am in West Virginia when I made that video. So, you know, not violating any laws because I am an upright, law-abiding citizen. Always have been, always will be. So shame on you for even thinking I would actually violate the law. So that video, like I said, I was in West Virginia. You can tell, watch the video. But like I said, can't have them in Washington because in Washington, they state anything that can make the gun fire more than once with 1 trigger pull and release or whatever. They word it differently, so they say binary triggers are illegal. And also, they're trying to defy the federal government and say that forced reset triggers are illegal, even though they do not violate any law. They fire once when you pull the trigger, and that's it. You release it, you got to pull it again. Now, it does help you let the trigger travel forward. You don't have to actually take your finger off trigger or release the pressure, so you can go faster. But by the letter of the law, it still just fires 1 round per trigger pull, which is why I never understood why they went after that one instead of binary triggers. But as of right now, I can't have either in the state of Washington. I could test the law, I guess, and get a forced reset trigger, but they're kind of expensive. And I don't really have any ARs to build, so... but like I was saying, both are legal federally, but your state could be different. A lot of states have jumped on the banning binary triggers, and they're also now jumping on the banning forced reset triggers. So pay attention to your state law. But federally, like I said, they're both legal. Not legal here for me, hopefully for you. But like I said, doesn't make any sense. If any of them violate the law, it's the binary trigger, but even it doesn't do it by the letter of the law because it only fires once when you pull the trigger, and it fires once when you release it. Law doesn't say anything like that, unless it's your state law. Our state law here says something about that, so they're definitely illegal here in the sate of Washington, which is why I was in West Virginia, like I said. But that right there, hopefully that explains the difference between the types of triggers, and probably doesn't clear up much of the legality stuff because, frankly, it doesn't make sense. And if you try to make sense out of it, you'll probably go crazy. But federal level, it's fine. As far as your state goes, check your own laws.